for the second knowledge transfer session by an alumni. Today we have with us Kritika, who would clear all your career-related questions, doubts, queries, anything you would like to ask her. Hi, Kritika. Thank you for joining us
Hello.
today. Could you
Hello.
please, yeah,
Yes.
hello. Could you please tell us about something about yourself?
Yes. So I'm not sure how many of you were there in the last session, but I'll give you a quick background about what I've done and where I am right now. So quickly, I did my engineering in India. I did electrical engineering, moved on to do a business analyst and a project manager role. For about 2.5 years. And then I think because I was doing a lot of technical work and I wanted to understand what the business functional side of things were, that's how I decided to do marketing. So I was working for Reliance, working in the petro marketing division. So that's where my interest for marketing actually built. But I had a fair share of idea about the technical stuff as well. So I think a lot of the marketing also came from my activities at university. So I was part of a lot of associations, clubs where I was the marketing lead. Not didn't have any formal education on what marketing was, but kept doing a lot of marketing activities because that's what took my interest. Though I was doing engineering, I did a lot of my internship was based in business development. So I did have that orientation towards the business side or the marketing side, and that's what actually pulled me to Cranfield. Uh, Specifically, since I think we are mostly marketing students in this call, I think what brought me towards, or what actually pulled me towards Cranfield were two things. One was the data analytics. Not a lot of universities were providing that. And that was something you hear a lot of data analytics going on around you, data science. That's like data is the new oil. That's what people talk about. So that's something I was really keen to understand. So that was one exciting part. And another thing was I was looking into, I had a lot of friends who were talking about consulting. They wanted to move into the consulting side of things. And I'm not sure if your curriculum still holds that, but we had a marketing consulting project which lasted for about a week, where we got live client projects coming into it was part of the course. So where we had to work on a 7-day project, and exactly like how a consultancy would work. So I think these two were the factors that actually stood out for me in terms of course curriculum, why I chose Cranfield. And yeah, that's how I moved to Cranfield. I finished my course and did a lot of job hunt for a year, and then managed to bag a job with Procter and Gamble. So that's where I am right now in UK.
Thank you. That was a lovely answer. How do you guys dealt with the pandemic situation, like in the university?
So in terms of academics, is that what you're asking me, or in general
Yeah,
how it was?
yeah. In terms of academics, in terms of picking up a job and something for part-time
Okay.
jobs as well.
Right. So I'll just sort of break this down. Obviously, pandemic, when it hit us, nobody was aware of what to do, including the institution. It was not just us students, and it was the first time it was happening. So even they didn't really know how to shift everything to an online mode because we were so used to being in classroom environments and things of that sort. Um, what I'd say is like it uh, to our luck, actually, we did have a spring break right when the pandemic hit us and everything went to an online mode. So the university had some time to prep themselves. We had about 2 to 3 modules which went online because we were in the thesis phase. So luckily, we didn't have everything online. But I think it was very beautifully managed because the university was very quick to learn what should be done, how students should be managed. I'm sure they've matured over time. We did have initial classes where we're like, what's happening? Like, when you don't have that peer-to-peer connection, you don't really feel like sitting in classes. I was somebody who really enjoyed our classes, and the first 2 sessions, I didn't really feel connected because it's a one-way system. Like how most video calls happen right now. There's everyone's on mute, everyone's videos are off, so you're not really connected with whatever's happening. The professor is just like talking on one side and you don't get any response. So classes did not have too much of a connect. But like I said, they were very quick to learn all of these, and exactly like how we had connected during classes with our learning groups and had breakout sessions, we had sessions that way. So at the end of every class, maybe it was like a 4 hour course, the last 45 minutes we'd be broken down into groups, and we'd have to go back, discuss, and come back with answers. So we were sort of, I'd say, pushed to interact even in that online environment, and that really made a huge difference to how we were learning. Of course, everyone, there was resistance to that sort of change, even in terms of students and professors. But I think it worked pretty well, considering that we had just two models. And I'm sure for you guys, everyone's a lot more accustomed to this system, so it will be better. On the bright side, I also know that there are hybrid classes happening. There are also students in Cranfield right now going into university and having classes. So I think that bit should be fine by the time you guys come in.
Yeah,
I think you asked me about part time.
yeah,
Um,
part
in,
time is.
yeah. In terms of part time, I actually quit my part time initially because of the pandemic. I was working in a store with a lot of interaction with people. And I think 2 to 3 weeks when the situation in UK got really bad, I did quit going to work. But with that said, there was a lot of demand, obviously, in groceries and a lot of those things. Um, so there were part-time jobs, there were a lot of part-time jobs, it's not like it wasn't there, and everything that went online. So what I did was that I was doing a physical job in the store, which I quit. And after a couple of months, I'm very passionate about dancing, so I started taking online dance classes for a lot of students. So students were sitting at home and they didn't know what to do other than go to classes. So a lot of other avenues open, so it's about just finding those opportunities. So there's part-time freelancing, whatever it is, you can continue doing, and nothing actually impacted it.
Okay. So, one question, one query that everybody was really curious to know about you, that you got into a project management role after doing your MSc in marketing.
Correct.
So, what was the mindset behind this thing? Like, how
All right.
did you go to the conclusion?
So like I mentioned, I did a project management role before, and for me, there were a couple of things, right? So now I did I closed more than 2.5 years of working, and I did my marketing role not specifically to get into let's say a business development role or a brand management, but I wanted to because I was working on a marketing side, I wanted to understand the business perspective of things. So I came in here maybe saying that, oh, I'm going to shift my line to digital marketing or something of that sort. But as I went into the course and during the duration of my, let's say, 1 year, there's something I keep telling a lot of students. My vision, or how I thought my career would be after a year, completely changed. I was not narrowed down to the things I knew. There was very little I knew about marketing when I came in, versus when I got out, it gave me a whole other perspective. And I realized that there were so many domains in marketing itself, which opened up for me. So my thought process improved. I started looking at things in customer relationship management. I started gauging my mix. So I had an IT technical project management background, as well as I had a marketing academia background now as well. So I tried looking for roles with where there was a perfect blend of all of these together. And at PNG, so to be fair, I did not narrow my scope. I did not look for niche brand, marketing roles alone. I also looked for a mix of what my previous role looked like, but being in a company where I could explore my marketing skills further. So with that being said, in the current project managerial role that I have, it's not just the technical side of things. Very often, because it's a consumer manufacturing goods company, I do also have to see how brands work. I need to look at the analytics of how brands work. And there's a lot of scope to grow in a company this way. So even now, when I do have conversations with people in the organization, they're very well aware about the fact that I have a marketing background and I'm doing something like an IT or technical project management. And we are ready to explore where I can put in my marketing expertise. So it was a mix of what my past experience was, what I learned, and also a combination of the organization. So looking at the organization, when you talk about PNG, or when you talk about something like an FMCG company, it's all about branding. So eventually you get into roles which are oriented towards the product itself. So that's what actually drove me. It was a combination of all of these which drove me to the project managerial role. If that answers
Okay.
your question.
Yeah. Thank you. That answers more questions actually.
Okay. Great.
So, if we do a part-time job in marketing,
Mhm.
would it be uh, considered as an experience for our further endeavors in marketing?
Okay. So this is something I also answered last time, where of course when you do something which is related to the job that you want to look into, you can add it to your resume, you can add it to your cover letter, and all of those things. But with all of those said, a CV or a cover letter is just a preliminary document. At the end of it, what they look at is whether you actually know what you're doing, right? So if you've done your part time in that and you've actually managed to learn something that is associated to the work that you're going to do or is going to help you in the work that you're going to do, then that's a bonus. But just having something like a marketing role on your profile as a part time, I don't think, like, my experience with all the interviews and all the interactions that I had is that at the end of it, irrespective of what's written, because anybody can write anything on your CV. Of course, it lets you go through the initial round. They see something like, oh, this person has a marketing experience. Um, at the end of it, they want to know whether you have the skill set for that. With that being said, doing part time in marketing also broadens your scope in the way that they know that you know how marketing works in the UK. I told this last time as well. Not everybody who does marketing in another country would know how things work in UK, and it's very important that they feel you are comfortable with the environment. They don't want to hand you a job. It's a different case if you're a fresher, maybe they're ready to train you and all of those things. But why would they choose an international student over somebody who's extremely familiar with the environment, who's going to be who the other employees are going to be comfortable working with, right? So in that case, I think it's very important to understand how things work in the UK, and that's why doing a part-time in marketing would really help.
Okay, cool. Uh, General question: what are the class hours weekly, basically, and what sorts of assignments are there in the marketing uh, MSc?
Okay. I think it's a very nice, fun mix of assignments. After engineering, I didn't really want to study. That was my case. But I loved studying the course at Cranfield. We had, I think, one exam where you like literally write an exam, and that's for your analytics. So you work on the JMP tool, and you have an exam for that. Luckily or unluckily for us, that did not happen because of the COVID situation. They canceled that exam, but I know this year around they are having an exam for that. Apart from that, your first question was the class hours. So it's very different from the technical classes. How those work is they have an 8 hour shift, like an 8 hour duration class. So they have like 1 week of 8 hours, 5 days a week, and then 1 week off. But for us, it's a lot more flexible. We just have like 4 hours a day. It shifts. So basically, we in our year we were put into learning groups, and I chose the morning batch in one semester, and then you get switched over in the next term. So you have like morning 4 hours for one entire semester, then you have another the next semester you have the evening 4 hours. So that gives you a great deal of flexibility because you can do a lot of other things during the day, whether it's your part time, whether it's your assignments. You're not tired because you're doing either a morning 4 hour and evening 4 hour. In the evening, you can do all of your assignments and all those things. Very rarely, because we do have professors who are actually consulting outside, or you have like guest speakers who come in, and because of their non-availability, sometimes you do end up having 8 hour classes which can get a little taxing, but not too bad. Personally, I was never stressed out with the classes or the assignments because they give you a fair amount of time. So let's say you have a module which runs for about 4 to 8 weeks. That's generally the duration, depending on the number of classes or the breakdown that you have. In the very first week, they will tell you what the assignment is, right? And that's a really interesting thing, because when they tell you what it is, you'd not have an idea about what you're doing. But as you go through your module, the professor will be like, you know what, this is the part that you might probably want to look into during your assignments. So through the process, because you know what the assignment is, and very early on, because this is a lot, it's very organization or company oriented. So let's say for a particular assignment that you need to do, you need to choose a company that you're going to work on or a brand that you're going to work on. So you need to choose this pretty early on during your course. And the fun part about this is every time, so you start doing your research. Let's say for me, one of the brands that I chose was Boots UK. So I knew I was going to work with this. And through the course, every module that you go through and everything that the professor would explain, you'd have Boots in your mind, and you're like, how can I work this around for Boots? How would it work for Boots? You have that on your mind. And every interaction that you have, because you have like 80 to 100 students, each one having a different brand and everyone having a different thought perspective, everyone working in a different domain, you have a lot of learning happening, because it's not just your perspective that's coming in, that's it's everyone's. And just because you have an assignment, people are not, I generally do see that, at least how people get very secretive about their work, not telling each other what's happening and things like that. That does not happen. Everyone's just out there telling what their thoughts are, and you really build on people's experiences, and others' thoughts. So I think that way your assignments are really nice. You just don't learn your bit, you learn what others are doing as well. um, and one thing to add to it, there's a lot of flexibility. They understand that not everyone's interested in the exact same thing. And because of that, um, if let's say there is a module called key account management, and you have, let's say, 10 topics in that, you are free to choose the topic that you like in the 10 topics that you, so maybe there is a topic, you have three models on that. You're not forced to do a particular model. You can decide what you want to work on and what actually interests you. And that was something really interesting for me, because um, I came from a separate, like I was very tech oriented. So I wanted to do a lot of things which drove me towards that, or that was my career path that I had in mind. So all my projects, from the first project up until my thesis, I ensured that I had that direction in whatever I was doing. So when I have a story at the end of the day, again, coming back to your job interviews or your cover letters, you do have a story that you worked on this project, you worked on the next project, you worked, and all of these, there is a link to what your persona is being built in front of the interviewer at the end of the day. Yeah.
We have another question about the comparison of MSc and MBA. If there would have been like if there wouldn't have been any MSc, would you consider doing MBA to further enrich your marketing career?
Okay. Initially, to be honest, what I looked into was an MBA, because I told you I had a couple of years of experience and I wanted to do MBA, and that's how in India, at least, there is no problem. People, that's the natural path that people take. But when I looked into UK, that was not the situation. First of all, you needed at least 3 years of experience in most of the leading universities, and that was the only reason that I started looking into the MSc direction. And I would say that was sort of a boon for me, because I did not consider, I'm like, why am I'm more like, I wanted to go into the project managerial side. I wanted to be a generalist. But how we see it, at least in India, is that you have electives, you can specialize a bit in marketing and all of those things. But when I realized that MBA needed 3 years experience is when I looked into the MSc side of things. And then there was an option between marketing and management. Um, if you want to build an expertise in marketing, I think the way to go is to take an MSc in marketing, because MBA is a very generalized course. If you have a fair share of marketing and you want to build on the other side of things, you want to switch lanes, you want to move into finance and all of those things, then okay, move into an MBA. But if you want to upskill yourself in marketing, I think MSc marketing is the way to go. Especially in Cranfield, I found this very holistic, because we hear the common terms. When you talk about marketing, you only think about sales. Now you think about digital marketing, or you think about a business development. These are the kind of things that you think. In Cranfield, they had that special emphasis that if you are, they're building managers out of you, not just marketing associates. if you need to be a manager, it's not just the niche stuff that you need to know. You also need to understand what data is coming in. You need to understand the finance that is going behind in marketing. So I found that they were looking at everything. For me right now as a project manager, it doesn't feel that because I learned marketing, I am pushed to only the marketing. That's the only thing that I know. It gave me a holistic idea of everything that happens around. So I think that course curriculum covers a lot of things, and that is pretty nice about the Cranfield course itself. Yes. So yes, my answer to that is I think you would have to go to a MSc marketing to really upskill yourself, even if you have a lot of experience and you want to continue in that path.
Okay, cool. So, what is exactly the validity of the tier 2 general visa, and can we switch jobs when we have that visa?
Okay. Yes. So tier two, generally you can, the validity is either 3 years or 5 years. Um, for us at least. Okay, now I'm going to tell you the benefit of first jumping from tier 4 to tier 2 visa. Now, there are certain tests, at least when I was applying to it, when you are not a tier 4 or you're not a student in UK, you need to go through some tests like labor market tests and all of those things, which is a whole process where they're trying to gauge whether you are better than a British, or right now EU does not come into picture, but you're better than a British citizen or employee over here. When you are a tier 4 student, you kind of bypass that. They don't really need to advertise your job or any of those things to understand if there is somebody who's better than you. Of course, internally they would look at it, but it's not a process that they need to put in paper where they need to gauge whether there are a lot more people with the same skill set. Why? It's basically trying to give them a reason why they should employ you. So the path, along with that, there's a lot of fees that is involved that the organization would have to give so that you become their employee under tier 2 visa. A lot of that is exempt when you are a tier 4 visa. So jumping from a tier 4 visa to a tier 2 visa is the best thing to do in terms of, from an organizational perspective. It's a lot more easier for them in terms of legalities, cost, and all of those things. uh, Previously, I think there was a labor market test when you jump from the one tier 2 visa to the other. So you have an option, the organization has an option to give you either a 3-year visa or a 5-year visa. And generally, what I've seen a pattern is that they give you a 3-year visa, because after a 5-year visa, you get an indefinite leave to remain. So they don't generally give you that 5 years right away. So I currently have like a 3-year work visa. I can jump from one organization to the other, but the other organization also should be able to sponsor you. It is not that you have a 3-year visa and you can use that visa to jump into another company. The other company has to be willing to sponsor you, and they have to renew this visa that you have. So it's not like you have a visa and that is a general visa for UK. This 3-year visa that I have is associated with my company. So when I jump, it needs to shift to another company.
Okay, thank you. Such a fruitful answer. So we have, I think we have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
Satya says, "Hi Kritika, what will be the job selection process in the UK? Is it a written exam, then an interview, as in India, or it is basically different in the UK?"
All right. Hi, Satya. So, to answer your question, there is no one way to go about with this. I have seen a combination of a couple of things. Um, all graduate programs will have a psychometric test for sure. Your psychometric test would be analyzing your basic math. It would be I can't remember the name of it. You have those patterns and you need to recognize. It's basically the kind of psychometric test that you see in India as well. It's very similar to that. And even if you have written GMAT, it's going to be very easy for you to tackle all of those questions. Along with that, in your psychometric test, you also have, other than checking your aptitude, they also look at your ability to handle situations. So they will put across some situations that you see at work and you need to answer. It's fairly easy because you get 4 answers. The thing is that there is no right answer with situational, right? You need to be consistent. They'll give you about 10-20 questions, which might be the same question in different patterns. They're trying to gauge what kind of a person that you are. familiarize yourself with psychometric tests. This is there in every graduate program that you have. If you're not going for graduate programs, not everything has a psychometric test. It depends from company to company. Once you're done with that, the next step is generally video interviews or telephonic interviews. Again, this depends, but I'll tell you what are the different interviews that at least I've gone through, so you have a fair share of an idea of what's happening. For video interviews, it could be of two types. Most of the time, it is a recording. So they give you a question and you need to record yourself. Very honestly, I was intimidated by that fact because you always want some sort of feedback when you talk to people, and we like interviews when we know, what's happening. Did they really like my answer? Was my answer right? Should I change my answer? So I found that extremely hard. That's something I didn't practice a lot. So when I had the camera in front of me, I had a question and I had like 2 minutes on the timer, I would get very panicky about it, especially the 2 3 times that I did it in the beginning. Obviously I got used to it over time, but that's something I'd recommend everybody to practice because you're not used to that. You have that camera in front of you and you tend to get intimidated by that fact. The next one is telephonic interview. So it's most of the time telephonic interview is before you go into the actual assessments. In those interviews, it would be somebody just trying to understand your fit in the organization, whether you need sponsorship, are you ready, willing to move into it, what is your skill set. It's a very preliminary telephonic interview. I don't know if you do not clear that, because all the telephone interviews I did clear and I found that very generic. So there was no telephone interview that I did not clear. And I feel it's just like a fit to see, as long as you say, yeah, I'm okay with anything in the organization. They take you forward with that particular round because they've done all of those preliminary analysis and then they're just looking for one last gateway to push you into the next assessment round. Just one tip that comes to my mind when I'm talking about all of this: when organizations ask you if you have a valid permit to work in the UK, considering the fact that you will have a postgraduate visa, uh, say yes, because I see a lot on LinkedIn. They have these questions: do you have the right to work in the UK? Say yes, because that at least gives you the opportunity to go into an interview. It's okay, you're not really saying something wrong, but at least that gives you a chance and it opens. The idea is to get a lot of interviews and try, get a go at it, try cracking it. So I would just suggest that if you get that option, don't say no, you don't have the right, because that literally stops your application over there. So try anything to actually push it to the next level. Yeah, and the last one is assessment. The assessment rounds, the one that I went through was obviously it is a face-to-face one, and that's what you guys will probably have, where they gauge you both on your, they know your CV in and out. So when you write something on your CV, you should know it. Don't write something that you don't know about, because they'll drill you through your CV. And it's not just do you know what is written on your CV, it's about, they'll put in situations where they'll be like, they'll ask you a question in a very twisted manner to see if you know what you actually wrote in your CV. So it's not necessarily technical. Of course, it depends on the role that you're applying. But they would be like, in this situation, when you were working on this project, how did you handle this situation? So you said you worked, I know one of the lines on my CV says that I worked in a project where I led about 20 to 25 people. They're like, you led a project with 25 people. How did you handle this situation? What if this conflict came in? How do you handle? So that's how the assessment worked. For me, it was virtual, but that's what you call the face-to-face interview, or that those were the final rounds for me. Yeah.
So yeah, Abhishek says, what's your take on the CIM after graduation? Are you planning for CIM certification anytime soon?
No, actually, I am not planning for CIM certification. To answer that question, that is a very good benefit that the university is providing. I know a lot of people who have done that certification as well. Now, when it comes to certification, again, what I'm going to say is that understand what the relevance of it is. Okay, just getting a certification does not always make sense. It's like how you get it's like doing a master's, right? It depends on what you get at the end of it. You are a master or you're a certified CIM, you have that certification with you. Look at the kind of job roles that you want are intending to apply to. Look at the job descriptions, look at the profiles of people who are actually working in those job profiles. find out if it's actually relevant to you. If it's in terms of just getting some sort of knowledge, go ahead for CIM certification. If it's just in terms of having a certification, go ahead, go for that. No certification is going to look bad on your profile. But why? The question is, why are you doing that CIM certification? For me, it was, is it going to add value to my job? Is it going to add value to the job that I am looking for me for? Sorry. Personally, in the job roles that I was looking for, CIM was not a the people in the industry did not have a certification, so it didn't look like a necessity for me to do it. And that is why, because when I came into Cranfield, I was like, oh, I'm going to do all of the certifications, that's going to add value and all of those things. But when I came in, I realized that it's not necessarily the certifications that value. A lot of jobs do look for particular certifications, and I know a certain job looks for like PMP certification or PMI certification and all of those things. So it's very specific to your job. Find out what the industry trends are. Maybe it's not CIM, maybe it is something else that people in the job role that you're looking for is applying for. Go for those certifications, because that really adds value. Not discouraging anyone to do any of the certifications, but be smart about the decision that you make. Don't do it for the sake of it.
So yeah, Khushbu is asking, can you name some common questions that are done in the, basically asked in the telephonic or face-to-face interviews?
Okay. I did have a huge list before. If I was better prepared, I think some of the questions that I had, a lot of it I remember was about how I handled situations. So, it was about, okay, at least in the jobs that I was looking for, and I'm guessing even in the marketing domain, specific marketing domain, you would have questions about leadership communication. So they were like, okay, I'll give you an example of one of the questions that came to me towards the end. It was about, if you had to convince so you do see, look, all of us in our generation have unconventional ideas, and you do have organizations which are very resistant to change right now. And let's say you have a senior manager, he's senior in position and he's very adamant about a particular decision that he made, but you know for sure that your decision, which is very unconventional, is the way to go. How do you convince this senior manager to adopt the way that you think in your mind? Now, this is a very generic question that I'm giving. What they would ask you is very specific to the role that you have. So for instance, I was working with something technical at that point. They're like, the situation is that you had this IT project and this is the situation that happened. So, but in general, generic, the question was around how you would handle situations. But if you're doing something like marketing, they would be like, okay, I'll give you an example of one of the pandemic questions that I got. It was about how you'd have stock issues, right? So because a particular brand was not functioning well, over the past few months, when they looked at the sales, it looked like those were the best performing products that you had. But the senior management decided that you need to get these two products off. They're not giving you a reason as to why these two products should be off, but you know for a fact at a lower level that these are your best performing products. How do you convince your senior management that you need to keep these products when they've already made that decision and put it across to you that these products need to be off the market? Right? So it's very specific to your domain that you're looking for a job, but they need to analyze what kind of a person that you are. So it's a combination of your situation and your domain knowledge. But to give you some specific questions, I might have some marked down somewhere in my notes. I could probably get back to Khushbu or any one of you with a list of what I have, at least what I've prepared with. And yeah, all of you, I think, I believe all of you are in Cranfield. We have Simplicity and we have a bulk of resources with all of the questions that do come in. So there's no dearth of it. Whatever I prepared also was from Simplicity, all the questions that came, the psychometric test. And from there, they will give you resources to other websites, and they'll have URL links as well. So these are very generic to the UK environments. If you take a look at that, it would be a repetition of whatever I prepared or I would be sharing. But most of what I prepared was also from Simplicity, which you would have access to.
Okay, so Karishma is asking, does the university provide any textbooks similar to in India, or they provide the notes online?
They provide you not even notes. Okay, so there will be presentations in classes. You get access to all of those. Along with that, you will get case study, you will get resources. Now, you get access to a lot of online resources. That is one, your library. They'll give you access to a lot of these where you need to get in papers. So it's a lot about reading. Your resources are not just textbooks. Textbooks, one of the last things that I actually used to look at. You read a lot of papers, and they'll give you all Cranfield students would get access to this for the course duration that you have. They will give you the best content that you need to read in terms of the book as well as the papers. There is limited stock in the library. I personally did not buy a textbook at all. I made do with all of the library resources and the online resources that I had. You can buy the books if you want. University is not going to provide you any books. University will provide you access to online resources as well as the library resource. So you need to book, you need to look ahead of time which book you want, because if you wait for the last minute where there's your assignment, you would have 5 books in the library and 100 people fighting for it. You're not going to get it. So you need to be a little well planned for all of these things, not too last minute. But online resources are available, and that is beautiful. Like, you get a lot of content in that. So that should be good enough. So to answer your question, university does not provide you textbook, but they provide you access to a lot of resources.
Okay. Uh, George is asking a naughty question. What about attendance? Is there a minimum criteria for attendance?
They don't care. It's up to you. You spent your money and you've come in, so it's your business to learn to attend classes. They do talk about attendance. They do say you need to maintain an 80%, and if they really, there is a close connection between all of the professors and the people in class. If they know, and you so you're put into learning teams, and your learning team often depends on you. You have a lot of interaction in class, a lot of activities in class, offline, everything. So it's not just the class that you need to attend, you also need to attend your meetings, and you need to be very proactive in your learning groups as well. Are they keeping a watch on you? Is there a CCTV camera? Is there an attendance? No, all of these things are not there. They might be there here and there. But if you are not active and you're not contributing, because most of this is group work, they put you in learning teams so that you know what it is to be out there when you work in organizations and you're in groups. If you're not providing enough input, your team members are going to complain about you. It's not even about, even if you attend those things and you're just physically there and not mentally there. I've seen a lot of cases where teams have conflicts among themselves because someone's not participating enough. So if they notice that you're not in class, they're going to reach out to you, not to mark you as somebody who's not attending class, you have an 80% or you have like a 60%, but more like to understand why are you not attending? Like, what can we help you with? What is that issue that you are facing that we can help you with? Right? So per se, the university does talk about attendance, but it's more about you being active and how you're going to collaborate in the environment, how much input you're going to be. Because when you're in learning groups and you have a particular part associated with you, there's a lot of dependency, like any other group works. If you don't do your work, that's going to hamper every other person's work. And that has happened to me personally, where I was stalled from doing my work because somebody else didn't do something. That person was a very last minute person, worked until the end date for the assignment, but my work depended on that person and I was not able to proceed with my work, and that becomes a problem. So I think in that environment, at least for me, I knew that I had to do my bit and I had to go to class, and even if I didn't go to class, I would sort of come back and see what the work was. So no, there is no particular attendance as such, but it's your responsibility to at least be proactive. Yeah.
Okay, so Satya is saying thanks for the elaborate reply. She has one more question. Can we start applying for jobs at the moment before we enter the UK through the
um,
job portals?
I didn't do that.
And
Yeah, sorry, go
okay,
ahead.
and the how much the career fair teams at Cranfield help?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, I did not start applying before it, but with that, of course, you can apply. There's nothing wrong with it. Why I didn't apply is because I wanted to get the careers team to first look at the CV and all of those initial documents that I was preparing. sorry, you don't know what the UK, how things are in the UK. We don't have a particular template when we are in India and any of those things. But when we are in UK, I was not sure about what this is. And I hadn't done too much of a research to see, like the university had provided a template and they want to ensure that you're providing things as per what their template is. So first thing what I did was I built my CV beforehand. I built my cover letter. I built one cover letter beforehand. And then very first week of my university, I went to careers. They ran through my profile and they told me what things work, how I should write a particular thing. So they just modified mine, and you just need to like book sessions with them. So they'll actually go through all of your content. Um, After that, I did not go for a lot of career sessions for my CV because I got a really good score on VMOC and I didn't need a lot of changes. And they had told me the points that I actually had to note in my CV or cover letter. So I worked on it. Careers team, apart from the careers fairs, organizes a lot of events. And these events are where companies come in. So you have alumni coming from particular companies. They bring in all of this, HRs, everyone, everything that's relevant to your job. They bring everybody. They bring students who have recently graduated from Cranfield, so they'll give you a closer perspective because they've just been there. Apart from that, they give you a lot of classes on your soft skills. And mind you, soft skills are extremely important in your job applications. Not in your initial rounds, but once it goes there, I feel that soft skills are something that is given more priority than your technical skills. They'll give you a lot of classes of how you should tackle this, how you should do your video assessments, how you should do your interviews. They have a lot of sessions and these are on repeat. So even if you miss one, you have a couple of sessions that are done over and over again. They also have sessions where how you can improve your LinkedIn profile. I mentioned this in my previous session that I found LinkedIn extremely useful, not particularly to apply to jobs, but to find industry trends. What are the companies, what kind of roles do they have, what are the people in those roles doing? So that gave me a lot of idea about how things work around in UK and how the job market is. So building your profile, all of those things. um, in all these sessions, attend all of these. This will give you, even if it's a 1 hour session, 1.5 hour session, I'm sure there will be at least one point that you learn, how much ever you have an idea about how things work, even if you have experience before or not. I learned a lot through this. In addition to this, like I mentioned, connect with the people who come to university. Every session that you attend, ask questions, connect with them on LinkedIn. Why connect with them on LinkedIn? Because it's not just them. You open yourself to a broader network. Once you connect with somebody from that industry, their posts, their comments, all of them open up to you. So their friends become your second or third connection, and you get access to a lot of things. So I connected to a lot of recruiters, and because if I connected to 10 recruiters, I had visibility of, let's say, another 100 recruiters because they had connections with recruiters. So recruiters connect with recruiters, and marketeers connect with marketeers. So that's how you kind of build your brand, or yeah, sort of build your brand on LinkedIn. So that helped me a lot in networking as well as understanding. So careers helped me both in getting an idea of the market, the soft skills, as well as it really strengthened my network.
One question that I had basically, when you're applying for a job, and if you got rejected in that job, is
Mhm.
there a chance uh, they'll see your rejection and reject you again on the basis of that
Some
if you
organizations
apply again? Yeah.
some organizations have a policy that you cannot apply if you have, I think it's ZS or some consultancy, I cannot remember now. They have a policy that if you have failed the first time, you cannot apply in the next 6 months. Which is another reason, that's a very good question actually, which is why you need to apply very early on, because you have 1 year. Let's say the first time you applied is sometime in March. In that 1 year in your course duration, you cannot apply again. But think that you applied in October and you're able to gauge yourself and understand where you can improve. You can apply after 6 months in that 1 year itself. So some organizations have that. Some organizations have the policy that you cannot apply to the same role, but you can apply to another role in the same organization. And
Okay.
some of them just don't have a restriction. In fact, they keep your data and they'll ask you after a point. They'll subscribe to if you're interested in a particular company, because job openings open not when you really want it. And if you, I had initially I had the problem that I would look at a particular company and I'm like, oh, that I don't have a job in that company. I would just forget about it because it was on my checklist and I cut it off because I already looked at that company. That's not the case. Subscribe to the notifications for jobs in those portals, because maybe around 3 months later, when you have forgotten about that company, there is a job that is actually fitting for you. So that would come back to you. So my inbox is still flooded with a lot of these, which I've not unsubscribed, but keep subscribing to these and you get notifications.
Okay. When Survi asks, when did you exactly started applying for jobs? Like in which month of your MSc?
Uh, October. So I came in September end and I started by first week of October, because that was very much on my agenda before I had left. So I started right from the first week that I joined Cranfield. I started applying for my job.
Okay.
More so
Uh,
not so full fledged, but at least start off in the beginning to get a flavor of how this works.
okay. So, which is the field in marketing where the most of the companies are hiring currently in the UK? So the most popular
Um,
one.
what I have seen, there is nothing as one particular area. I would say in the UK, there's scope for a lot of things. In fact, there is a scope for a lot of things that you wouldn't even know from university. It's not even like the courses that you see. What I used to do is match my courses and try to look for jobs associated with that. But there are so many things that you don't even know about. I look at a job description and I'm like, oh, there's a job for this as well. So they break down every narrow thing. So I think if you have something in your mind, there is a job for that in UK. But in terms of demand, what I've seen in through my years of training, job hunt, was there's a high demand for B2B. Like they have a lot of people for branding and all of those things, but I think that having B2B or key account management, this was one area which I was never aware of, because I worked in a very B2C environment. There is a high demand for that. They're looking for key account managers to, because every huge organization needs to maintain their relationship with the other organizations. They need to that sort of loyalty or that sort of connection that they have is very primary to big organizations. So I saw a lot of demand in key account management, or B2B sales as you call it. uh, Digital marketing is another area. Now, again, digital marketing is broken down to way too many roles right now. There is no digital marketer. There is, you see PPC roles. You see somebody who is very good in optimization. So this is again broken down. Either you can be a specialist in the entire digital marketing, but they look for those kind of roles when you have a little more experience. They'll not give you a digital marketer a generic role when you're starting off, unless it is a very small organization, but they would look for something very specific even in digital marketing. But I've seen a lot of demand there. The third one that I would say is analytics. I've seen very high demand where they're looking for people who understand marketing as well as analytics, because not everyone who understands analytics understands the business side of things, and they're not able to make fruitful decisions. They can only do the analysis part of it or the technical front. I've seen a huge demand for people who have a combination, who can actually make sense of the data that you have. So yeah, these are the three areas where I've seen a lot of demand. Branding sales obviously has the natural demand that you talk about, but there are also that many people who have that kind of expertise or skill set. So these are the areas that you can actually tap into, where they are really looking for people and they're trying to expand in the UK.
Okay. Another question from Surbi. Can we access the online resources, study material, or anything readings on Kindle and like other reading platforms?
Those are just the books that you have available online, but most of the recommended books by our professors, you can buy it on Kindle. Not You don't get any of the free. You don't get free material that you can access over there. No.
Okay. So again, Surbi, I think someone has a lot of doubts. So, but if we want to acquire more skills during the masters, should we still apply in the beginning of our course? I think she is trying to say that first we should acquire skills, then apply for jobs, or first in the beginning we should apply. for those.
Okay. Apply for jobs,
Yep.
acquire skills on the way. What you should know is when you're applying for a job, you're not necessarily applying it to, it's not that you are going to get that job, right? The more jobs that you apply for, you know where you need to, even when you're acquiring skills, you need to do some sort of smart work. You don't, if you, every topic is broad, right? You can't tackle everything. You need to know what you really need to focus on. How do you understand that? By knowing what's actually going on, right? So my suggestion personally would be to apply for jobs. While applying for jobs, this will broaden your knowledge a lot. You're going to learn a lot of things, and that will help you to acquire skills much better. So apply and acquire it simultaneously, but don't wait to acquire the skill set and then look for a job role. But because of course, if you're sure that this is an acquired skill set, you can still apply for particular jobs that are very specific to your acquired skills. But in the meantime, apply for all the jobs that you can.
Okay. So thank you, Kritika, for joining us. Everybody is thanking you in the chat as well.
Yes, thank you everybody for having me over once again. I think this is clearing a
It
lot of
was,
my mind as well. And nice, no? Little
yeah.
bit of, since I knew we had all just Cranfielders, I don't know how much you can see. You probably, all of you will get a Cranfield mug when you do go in to university.
I wish that we will have a Grand Crew mug as well over there.
Oh yes, definitely. I think this is a brilliant initiative that you guys have, and also that it's not just Cranfield. You've also in the last session, I think, included a lot of other people. So it's really nice. I do have a lot of people reaching out to me, also asking questions. I hope I've answered most of your questions here, and this was helpful.
Okay. So everyone, you will be able to access the recording, I think, after the meeting if you want to clear some doubts again. Prajwal, please share the link on the groups. Thanks, Kritika, again.
All
Uh,
right.
Thanks for clearing our doubts.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
All
you,
the best.
everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Bye bye.